name's Leanne Butterworth, founder of Empathy First, and I'm about to share with you a workshop based on the chapter that I wrote in the new book, Women Making a Difference. So my new chapter is called Uncomplicating Empathy, a Guide to Making a Difference. So like I said, my name's Leanne Butterworth and I run Empathy First, which is a social enterprise. I lecture social enterprise at QUT. I did a TEDx talk called Healthy Empathy, How Empathy Can Save Lives, including yours. It's a picture of me up on the TEDx stage. And in 2023, I won the People's Choice Social Enterprise Award with the Women Changing the World Awards. So my goal here at Empathy First is to create a world where everyone feels heard, valued, visible, and safe. So what we're going to cover in the next 20 minutes, half an hour, are three things. We're going to talk about healthy empathy, but we're going to talk about what it is, why it matters, and a little bit about how to practice it. Now, anytime I get up in front of us on a stage in front of a room full of people and talk about empathy, quite often there's a lot of misperception and a lot of myths around empathy that I have to overcome first. And I talk about a couple of these in my chapter. But some of the myths around empathy, especially in Australia, that we believe are things like empathy is give, give, give. It's just about the feelings. Empathy is a weakness. You're either born with it or you're not. It doesn't belong at work. And empathy leads to burnout. Now, none of those are true. So when we talk about empathy, we have to understand that not all empathy is healthy empathy. And if we're going to start having discussions about empathy and leadership and design and customer service, we need to make sure that we are all talking about the same thing. So empathy is a relatively new concept. It's only been around in our language since about the early 1900s. And there are lots of research and lots of mental models all over the world. Now, the mental model or the model of empathy that I've used is based on the work of Goleman and Ekman, two emotional intelligence gurus out of the US. And I talk about the three different types of empathy. But we have to understand that empathy, healthy empathy, is a skill that must be understood and practiced over a lifetime. All right, so it's not a set and forget. It's not something you're either born with or you're not. So we're going to now tap into, if it's a skill that can be understood and practiced, let's start to pull it apart into these three types. So you can see here it says three types of empathy. I've got my little Venn diagram here. Out on the outside, we've got unhealthy, and in the middle, we've got healthy empathy. So let's go through it. Now, the first type of empathy is called emotional empathy. It's also called emotional contagion. It's the feeling of the feelings. It's the one where if your friend is feeling sad or anxious, you feel a little bit sad or anxious. And it's perfectly normal. It's part of the human experience. It's what helps us build relationships, really. It's because we're not robots. Now, unfortunately, emotional empathy can become unhealthy if we take on too much, if we take on other people's stuff, if we don't have good emotional literacy, if we don't have good emotional boundaries, if we absorb other people's emotions, if we feel sorry for them, or if we feel instead of them. Now, that's where a lot of burnout and fatigue can happen, because we take on too much of other people's emotions because we don't have those good emotional regulation skills and emotional boundaries. Now, if we do that too much, we can actually end up in apathy, which is, I don't care anymore. I don't have the capacity, okay? So you'll see there, my little diagram, my friend is feeling pink and I'm just absorbing all of their stuff. Now, that is not healthy. It is not sustainable, all right? The second type is the thinking. So the cognitive empathy, that's the one when we take somebody else's perspective. You might have heard of the phrase, put yourself in someone else's shoes. So when we're putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, it's really important to practice healthy empathy, that we take our own shoes off first. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're interpreting somebody else's perspective just through our experience, our unconscious bias, our assumptions. And instead of really learning what it's like to be them, we're just interpreting them through our lens. And that's where things like assumptions and unsolicited advice can come in. It's telling people what they should do. It's saying, oh, if I was you, I wouldn't do this, or you should just feel this way, or you should just do that. So being really aware of actually putting on a growth mindset and being aware of what it's like to actually be somebody else and really getting curious about them. And you can see my friend is feeling pink, but I haven't asked any questions. I'm just going to make a whole lot of assumptions about their experience. Compassionate is the doing. It's the one in the middle. It's the one we're aspiring to. So it's the active part of healthy empathy. So it's the ability to share and understand, or attempt to share and understand, the feelings and perspectives of someone else, and reply in a way or respond in a way that makes them feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. So when we're looking at healthy emotional empathy, we've got curiosity, listening, self-care, boundaries, feeling with somebody, and understanding what emotional literacy, emotional vocabulary, emotional regulation is. That's healthy emotional empathy. Healthy cognitive empathy is learning about our unconscious bias, understanding curiosity, being curious about their stories and their humanity, learning to actively listen to emotions and stories, imagining. So being able to get outside of our own perspective, being willing to learn and grow and take on and potentially change our perspective. And then what we want to do is respond appropriately. Now, across the board, whether you know what someone is going through or not, appropriately is always responding in a way that makes someone feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. Even if you don't know what their perspective is, even if you can't even wrap your head around it, that person, without fail, does not want unsolicited advice. They do not want to feel dismissed. They want to feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. So you can see my friend is there, and I'm taking on a little bit of them, and they're taking on a little bit of me, because it's not just a one-way street. You don't then become just a dumping ground for everybody's stuff. All right. So healthy, compassionate empathy, the ability to share and understand, or attempt to share and understand, the feelings and perspectives of someone else, and respond in a way that makes them feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. And when we look at empathy, when we look at healthy empathy, there are three directions. So the first direction is for ourselves. So understanding ourselves, understanding our emotions, our trauma, our experiences, our perspective, our privilege, understanding that. Then we look at our colleagues or our spouses or people that we are working with, and we have empathy there. So team cohesion, creativity, innovation all happens in that space. And then the third direction is kind of a downwards direction, which is for our kids or our clients or our patients or the public. It's a slightly different relationship. So three directions of healthy empathy: for ourselves, for our colleagues and spouses and family, and then for those in our care. Now, always the first lesson in empathy is always breathing. So we're going to do a really quick breathing exercise now. It's called balloon breathing. So what I would like you to do is put your hands on your tummy, close your eyes if you feel comfortable, roll your shoulders out. Now, I want you to imagine that there is a balloon, a deflated balloon inside your tummy. And you're going to take a big deep breath in through your nose, and you're going to make your balloon as big as you can possibly make it. Preferably, I'd like you sitting for this, not standing. And when your balloon is nice and full, we're going to keep our shoulders relaxed, and we're going to breathe out through our mouth, making our balloon as small as we possibly can. We're going to go again. We're going to breathe in through our nose, relaxing our shoulders, making our tummy as big as we can because there's a balloon in it that we're filling up. We're going to hold for a count of 2. And then as you breathe out, you're going to think of the last time you felt, or a time you felt heard, valued, or visible in a conversation. we're going to do that one again. In through our nose. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Make your balloon as big as you can. Hold for a count of 2. And then as you breathe out, you're going to think of a time when you felt heard, valued, visible, and safe in a conversation. Whenever you're ready, come back to me. Open your eyes. Unclench your jaw. All right. Now, the reason we do that and the reason breathing is so important is because what breathing does, what deep breathing does, it brings oxygen to our brain. It means we can become mindful of the present moment. It means we can regulate our nervous system and we can become mindful of our own emotions, which means we can then become mindful of someone else's emotions. The other thing that it does, it's called co-regulation. Yes, our nervous system calms down, but it means that the other person can also, they kind of catch that calm. It's called co-regulation. They also calm down. It's a lot more effective than saying to somebody, you should just calm down. So when we're thinking about a time when we felt heard, valued, and visible and safe in a conversation, what tends to happen is we tend to relax, even if that conversation was 30 years ago. We tend to relax, we tend to get calm. Now, if we think for a minute what the other person was doing or saying, they were probably listening. They were probably nodding. Maybe they gave us a hug. Maybe they were validating our emotions and saying, yeah, it makes perfect sense you feel that way. Maybe they were asking curious questions. And by doing that, we start to feel relaxed. Our trust builds, our relationships strengthen. We have a chance to process our stuff and have good conversations and really understand what it is that we're feeling or what we're going through. My guess is that they weren't saying, you know what you should just do. And they weren't telling you you shouldn't feel that way. And they probably weren't mocking you for how you felt. Now, that's a really, really important lesson when it comes to empathy. So we don't need to know exactly what somebody else is thinking or feeling, but we need to create a space where they feel heard, valued, visible, and safe enough to share with us, because that really is where the power lies. That's where relationships are built. And there's a beautiful quote by Maya Angelou. At the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They'll remember how you made them feel. And really, if we can tap into how we feel in those conversations, how we feel, what impact that has on us when we're in that safe space, that's really when we can turn it around and start to create that for other people. Now, the second activity that we're going to do, because this is a very short workshop, is we're going to do a quick listening activity. Again, what I'd like you to do, close your eyes, roll your shoulders out, and I'd like you to pay attention, if you can, and I'd like you to focus in on whether there are any natural sounds that you can hear. So frogs and birds and crickets. So we'll take just a moment. All right, take a big deep breath for me. Now we're going to take another second and we're going to listen for any voices, any human voices that you can hear. And now the third one we're going to do is we're going to listen for any man-made sounds. So any traffic noise, any airplanes, any trains. I'm just going to focus in. All right. Now, how did that feel? Come back to me, open your eyes. How did that feel? So when we're listening for particular sounds, it actually becomes easier to focus in. When we're trying to take it all in, we miss things. So how did you go with that particular exercise? Now, the reason we do that is because when we're having conversations, when we want to make somebody feel heard, like authentically heard, valued, visible, and safe, what we want to do is make sure that we are listening for the right thing. Because if we are having a conversation and we are listening for problems to solve, we will tap into problems to solve, which creates disconnection. If we were listening for gaps in the conversation, we're listening for gaps so that we can fill them, creates disconnection. If we're having a conversation and we're listening for things that relate to our own experience and we want to talk about ourselves, creates disconnection. What we want to do is listen for the stories and listen for the emotions that underlie those stories. And we want to try and validate those emotions, because all emotions are valid. We can spend days, and I have an emotional literacy boot camp, but we can spend days talking about emotional literacy and emotional regulation and emotional vocabulary. But ultimately, when we're listening and we're having conversations, we want to listen for the emotion. So whether it's frustration, humiliation, excitement, and we want to expand our vocabulary bigger than just mad, bad, sad, or glad. When we're having these conversations, when we're listening for particular things in conversations, it can be really good to self-reflect and think about, well, what is my value in this conversation? What is my role? And if our role, if our personal value is in being helpful and being perfect, in how smart we are, in the things that we've achieved, in how useful we are, in people thanking us, in giving the best advice and providing the best solutions, if that's how we value ourselves, when we have a conversation, potentially that's what we're listening for. And the trouble is, all of these things, as we mentioned in the chapter, will actually create disconnection. People do not connect with us for how smart we are. They do not connect with us for giving the best unsolicited advice. Our presence, our ability to be present for somebody, and again, create that safe space, that is our value as a human. That is your value in a relationship, is to make somebody authentically, genuinely feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. It's a beautiful quote saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Even if we're giving advice, even if they've asked for our advice, if they don't believe that we care, they are not going to take our advice. People are not interested in how smart we are. So beautiful quote by Theodore Roosevelt, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Now, when we are listening for the emotions, when we are listening for the story, here are some beautiful phrases. Now, I'm not saying we become empathy robots. We are not looking for scripts. This has to be authentic. But these are some things that we can have in our back pocket just in case. So phrases like, I get a sense this is difficult for you. You are not alone. I hear what you're saying. I believe you. I hear you. I understand. Most people would have reacted that way. I can hear that you are very, or I can hear that you feel. And it's interesting because even if we get that wrong, even if we say, I can hear you're feeling humiliated, and they go, no, actually, I'm really frustrated. There's research out of Stanford by Alyssa Yu that says even if we get it wrong, we build trust because we had a go. We build trust because we tried to identify how they were feeling. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds awful. That sounds stressful. That sounds scary. It sounds like you felt ... or that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense you feel that way. What's going on? How can I help? Let's go for a walk. Yeah, so they're validating statements. Then we start to get curious. And there are some great questions that we can ask in getting curious. So we can ask things like, how are you today? Brings us into the present moment. How did that make you feel? Tell me more about that. How might we approach this? How might we help you? How might we come up with some problem solving? Would you like some help with some problem solving? Can you give me an example? What are your thoughts about? So even just getting people talking, help me understand. And you can see that none of these I assume to have the answer. None of these I'm giving advice. What's most important to you? This one's hugely important in client relationships, especially healthcare. What was that like for you? How can I best support you right now? And an empathetic question is, what was my role in that? So rather than wondering what somebody got wrong or what somebody needs, you go, oh, what was my role in that? What was the thing that I could have done better so that they felt more supported, so that they got the right answer or felt safe? What was my role in that? All right, so really curious questions. There's a beautiful phrase by Brene Brown, and she says, empathy has no script. There is no right or wrong way to do it. It is simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, and communicating that incredibly healing message of you are not alone. So that's healthy empathy in a nutshell. My name's Leanne Butterworth. I run Empathy First. If you would like to find me, I'm at empathyfirst.com.au, social media, Instagram, empathyfirsthq, or you can email me at leanne@empathyfirst.com.au. QR code there is to a page of links, my TEDx talk, various resources. Thank you so much for joining me for my workshop, for my chapter in Women Making a Difference, Uncomplicating Empathy, a guide to making a difference. I'm so glad you joined me. I'll see you next time.